Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Attack of the Clones. This film came out in 2002. It was directed by George Lucas. So we continue on from The Phantom Menace. Go watch my review for that one for context. But honestly, I've really been dreading this one. Of all the Star Wars films, seriously, I hate Attack of the Clones. It takes me places that I didn't know that I was capable of mentally. This is one of those films where it is a particular nightmare if you are a critic. And when I watched this film most recently for this review, I'm just like, where do I begin? Really, how do I review this? Watching this, I felt like, like the wildebeest from The Lion King are coming down the hill and Simba's just like, yeah. But I will say, if you've never seen the prequels before, and then you watch Attack of the Clones, suddenly it starts to kind of come into focus a little bit more. You start to kind of understand how part 1, part 2, and 3 are going to work, the beginning, the middle, and the end of this whole, prequel trilogy. And suddenly it's like, okay, but I have a lot of questions now about The Phantom Menace, such as, why make this? Quite seriously, why make it? Because the whole thing suddenly feels completely mismanaged. It's like, Phantom Menace, in a way, is almost like this little vignette before the actual important story. It just doesn't feel that important to the core story here. I just don't really see a reason to show him as a kid unless, if you wanted to do like a flashback sequence, you want to go like maybe Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade style or something like that. And the way that the timeline works here, we're missing a huge chunk of information, a huge part of the timeline in between Attack of the Clones, or I'm sorry, in between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So it's like a lot of the information that we need that directly ties into Attack of the Clones we don't have, so therefore we haven't built much emotion. I don't know, I think I would have started the story here. I would have started episode 1 here, or at least somewhere along the way between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, so we can see Anakin as a teenager and, building that camaraderie with Obi-Wan for sure. That particular dynamic, I think, is very important, and yet we never really get much of it in this particular trilogy. And there is quite a leap from Anakin as a boy to Anakin in this film, and I think as many of us know, Anakin in Attack of the Clones is a bitch, which is already going to be a letdown. But then when you look at The Phantom Menace, where he's like this wide-eyed, innocent child, way too sentimental, quite frankly, but it's like, how did he make this transition? It's something I'd personally like to be let in on as somebody who is interested in the slow, tragic downfall of Darth Vader. To me, that's what it should be about. I think that the prequels should be about the tragedy of the Skywalkers, and then the original trilogy, or episodes 4, 5, and 6, should be the Skywalker success, or the Skywalker redemption, I should say. And I just don't think that the prequel should be drowning in unnecessary historical context, just because, the historical context doesn't really make sense to begin with. We're trying to kind of pick out the parts that should be crucial to the plot, where we're having to pick out the emotional arcs, and it's very much like a Where's Waldo situation initially. Now, I can buy into Anakin being very dark and conflicted, kind of like a trigger-happy teenager for sure. That does feel proper. It does feel realistic, but I just don't buy this particular Hayden Christensen version. I watch this and I think, yeah, this dude would never become Darth Vader. And because of that, I don't really have a connection with him, and I'm rooting against him, and that is a huge problem for sure. But I don't know, I like the idea of him starting out as maybe somebody that is relatable. He can be a nice kid, but he can be maybe just a little bit edgy, a little bit unpredictable. The second one, he starts to get tested as he becomes a capable Jedi or whatever, and then comes the ultimate crossroads in the third part, where Vader is finally unleashed. I think that would feel a lot more earned. It would feel a lot more realistic, because we need to like Anakin. We've got to find a way to connect with him. Otherwise, the third part doesn't really work much at all. But with this film in particular, I think of all the prequels, I find this one the most difficult to connect to emotionally. It's just so sterile, and I just feel like I'm desperate for warmth. I'm desperate for some sort of human authenticity to it. And I want some sort of consistent tone here, because it's like supposed to be dark, but it comes off as awkward or humorous, or something emotional comes off as awkward and humorous. It's such a mess. When it comes to the core story of this film, it is of course about Anakin and the love story between him and Padme, which I dare you to say that with a straight face. Watching the two of them on screen, it's so, I actively feel embarrassed watching it. Like if there's anybody with me, I feel as though I wrote it and I'm like embarrassed and I don't want them to be watching it with me. That is just the feeling that this film gives me. Padme in this film feels like she's kind of wrung dry of any sort of significance that they claim that she has. It feels like her story kind of ended in The Phantom Menace, and everything here is very forced. And I just have so many questions. This entire film is like wearing like a Jim Carrey Riddler jacket that lights up, you know? And the whole plot, I think, to assassinate her just feels really hand-fisted. And it's just kind of, again, it's in order to pressure a sort of significance that they claim that she has. And the motivations here just don't really make sense. And when it comes to a love story, that needs to be very clear, I think. But I really have no idea why Padme likes him. I don't get a sense of what she would see in him at all, because all they really show them doing are arguing, and he's very pouty and annoying. They're like pretending it's this like Romeo and Juliet star-crossed lovers thing. And more embarrassingly, it's that George Lucas wrote these scenes as if he's like, I don't know, like an 11-year-old girl who's read way too many romance novels. Some people do defend this film, and they defend the dialogue, saying it's like one of those, it's so bad it's good sorts of things. But for me, it's like, I don't feel that way at all. This is just a so bad it's bad sort of experience, because there's not enough quirks, there's not enough charm, there's not enough humanity here for it to be a so bad it's good. This is just really depressing to me. Like when I watch it, I feel like, oh, this is what it means to kind of actively die inside. It's like I can see it from George Lucas. And yeah, for me, that's devastating. It is very soulless. It feels like I'm a kid in the back of a classroom watching like a PowerPoint presentation in 2002. I'm watching my teacher, this middle-aged man, and he's such a loser, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if this guy was ever cool. I wonder if this guy was ever a rebel. And that's what I wonder watching George Lucas. He is now that awkward teacher that can't connect to the young people, in my opinion. Yeah, maybe he used to be a rebel. He used to be a pioneer back in like, you know, the 70s. But now it's like, no, he has a mortgage and a hernia. This film, and quite frankly, all of the prequels, do have this feeling of like bad video game dialogue, or like some forced kind of RPG where it's like you go up to a person and they have all the answers as to where you need to go for your next objective and what it's going to mean for the whole, you know, experience of the game. Everything is just given to you. And I suppose that part's consistent, because a lot of the action scenes here feel very much like a rated E for everyone PlayStation 2 game. The look of the film is just not attractive, and I can't believe anyone would think that it looks attractive aesthetically. It's just like the sheen of it. There's like this weird kind of airbrushed look, and everything is naturally disjointed because there's so much blue screen that is used here. It is like a mid-2000s kind of Apple Store experience or something like that. And I keep saying mid-2000s just because obviously this film is from that time, and the film is just so dated. I mean, you just see it for 2 seconds and you instantly know what year it came out. You watch, you know, like The Empire Strikes Back, and that film is just so gorgeous. It's so timeless. It looks so much better than this. It's shocking. And it almost feels like, and I don't know this, so don't quote me or anything, but it's like, it's almost as if the Phantom Menace backlash was really quite strong at the time, and you know, rightfully so in my opinion. But it's almost like they kind of quit trying a little bit. Like obviously everything is already in motion, but it's like after that, it almost feels like the motivation changed a little bit. With Phantom Menace, it felt like things were a little bit more handmade. I mean, obviously there's a ton of computer in it, but there just felt like there was a little bit more attention to detail in it in terms of the aesthetic. It's not just fully plunged into the special effects in the way that this one makes me feel. Attack of the Clones feels like they are scrambling a lot of the time, like things didn't quite work out in the way that they intended for Phantom Menace, and a lot of the negative backlash meant like, okay, we got to dial back on certain elements that we had planned to take forward, and then we've got to double down on other things. Count Dooku is an example of that, I think. He just feels very much thrown in here, like a last-minute villain, and again, a lot of the elements here do feel very last-minute. And this is the first time watching a Star Wars film, and again, I'm going from the originals through this one as they were made in order, but it's like this is the first film where I'm realizing that the aesthetic, the look, the special effects, everything is no longer the strong suit of this trilogy. I really don't know what the strong suit is at all. It just looks very uninspired creatively, and not to say people didn't work really hard to make these sorts of things, but I don't know. I just feel like there's something missing here. And you know, you've got sequences that completely exploit the characters, and all the dignity gets thrown out the window, such as, of course, Yoda fighting Count Dooku at the end of this film is just nauseating to me, because it is just, of all the things, I think it's one of the more counterintuitive moments of all of Star Wars. I don't believe that Yoda would do something like that. I feel like Yoda should always be a very respected warrior who never draws his sword. And if he were going to fight, I think he would be the kind of fighter who's very clean, sharp, and swift, and does not use a lot of excessive movement. And yet here he's doing all these backflips and spins, and it's just, It's showing off. This whole movie is about showing off, bells and whistles, not about a mindful warrior or whatever the Force, stood for initially. You'd think a 7-year-old with like a little Yoda doll, a little action figure decided to write this. Of course, that's what they would come up with. And really, of course, as per usual, with every film in this prequel trilogy, once you start to break it down, better yet, don't. So exploring the lore here feels like a homework assignment rather than something entertaining. And yeah, so it's like, I'm trying to understand here. Obviously, the main idea is that the film revolves around this whole clone army that they're building for the Republic. And the whole thing is building to this big climax on Geonosis. But how it gets there is the most convoluted, nonsensical garbage. And I think that George Lucas is actively trying to make us crazy. I'm convinced. So we have the Separatists, and they're developing this droid army there over here. And then obviously we have the clone army for the Republic, and they're over here. And obviously we don't really get the origins. All that sounds sketchy as shit. And I have about 6 million very, very valid questions that are essential to my understanding of it. As I said, you're not going to get any of these answered in this film, and that's a huge problem. Screenwriting 101, but whatever. So the Separatists are like working for Dooku, but Dooku really works for Palpatine, and then the clone army really technically is in the hands of Palpatine ultimately. And all of this is unbeknownst to the Republic and the Jedi. So basically you have this big climax at the end, this huge battle that's going on between the droids and the clone army. And I'm shocked because it's like, I've never seen a battle this big where I have no clue what's going on. I have no clue what side is what. I guess this is kind of part of why I like The Phantom Menace a little bit better. And obviously it's a very, very low bar, and in a lot of ways, in many ways, the script for Phantom Menace is the most useless and it's the most messy of all of them. I'm not quite as lost in the climax as I am here. There just feels like a lot less paying attention to the building of tension with this particular film. It's like, again, very much a PowerPoint presentation where everything is just kind of, handled in this monotone, very little variation. I just find Phantom Menace, I think, more visually distinct. I feel like there's a little bit more passion and nuance and creativity when it comes to the look of everything and the world building. I think the music is more interesting overall. I think Across the Stars, which is the love theme for Attack of the Clones, is phenomenally good. And I think it's one of the more complex themes that John Williams ever wrote for Star Wars. But it just feels very out of place because, again, we're thinking about Anakin and Padme, and it's like this great piece is not worthy of this. That belongs in like a Franco Zeffirelli type of like Romeo and Juliet film from like the 1960s or something, not fucking Star Wars. I think that Attack of the Clones is nearly off the rails, and I'm not kidding. Nearly everything about this film hurts me. It feels like some sort of tool that is used to break people's minds or something, and it's like, you see with this film, George Lucas is a master of certain things. He's a master marketer of the most vapid stuff. It's meaningless. I feel the most angry at him watching this film. It's because he's exploiting his own work and exploiting all kinds of work from all the people around him due to ego, due to, being competitive. I don't know what. Like I said, he claims to hate directing, or he claims to be somebody who doesn't like to direct when he's the one in charge of everything, and yet he's very much a micro manager. So, I'm just so confused by him, quite frankly. Phantom Menace, I don't know. I know I was quite nice to it in my review. I just, I guess I find it terrible in a fascinating way, whereas with Attack of the Clones, I actively want to get off the ride. I said in my review for The Phantom Menace that I unapologetically love George Lucas. I take that back. After watching this film, I still love him, but I really apologize for it. But of course, if I'm going to be fair, there are some redeeming qualities of the film, just very, 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 very few. But I think at least like The Phantom Menace, I do think that they do okay with the worlds compared to, the new trilogy, episodes 7 through 9. Even though it's tasteless and I find it to be incredibly half-assed, there is an attempt at creating characters that, obviously exist in the world that they're born into in a way that is, somewhat cohesive. A lot of times they fit into their environment, kind of like Camino. I kind of liked that planet and I found it somewhat intriguing. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all, but they did at least put some thought into what, a clone army might be like. And if somebody could explain it to me, maybe I would feel differently about it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not like Rise of Skywalker. It's not that demented. It at least has some resemblance of cohesion and structure. And, it is still wanting to be very much distinct and separate from everything else in the rest of Star Wars, which I do admire. And the fan service here, I actually kind of like. I know not everybody likes the fan service, in particular in Attack of the Clones, but compared to a lot of the stuff we see today, I find it to be quite clever. It is a little bit too on the nose at times for sure. And I think the attempt is a little bit more overt here compared to the Phantom Menace. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the times that they use the fan service, again, it feels like it does connect to the story. It's like when Obi-Wan is, in the club, the bar, whatever, for the drink, and, the assassin comes up behind him, and it's obviously a callback to the Mos Eisley Cantina. It does at least move the story forward. Now, of course, if you think about it too hard, it's going to seem really stupid and all of that, but I'm trying to be nice here, guys. But I do admire that it wants to stand on its own. I question the taste level of every decision here, basically. But yeah, when I think about Star Wars, this is really where I start to go into the dark place. It's like I can give Phantom Menace a little bit of a pass. It does hurt, but this one really is where we've gone beyond the point of no return. If there is anybody out there who genuinely likes this movie, please explain to me why you think it's good. I genuinely would love to know, because I really struggle with it. I struggle to find anything redeemable really about this. So certainly I can't recommend it, but it is part of the experience. So, taking one for the team, I guess. But yeah, that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. Welcome to the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch my videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.